It's the BBG, not the BBC. You're listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester.
Welcome to the programme. It's been another amazing day in Salford. It's beautiful. The northwest in general, basking in the sunshine today. Temperatures around 20 degrees. Oh, it's been lovely. Not that I saw much of it. Are you having a good Thursday? It is April 16th, 2020. My name is Richie Allen. Got a really interesting programme for you today. You'll tweet me, no doubt, with your opinions on the Twitter thing. Lovely to be with you. To be with you, lovely. Let's do it. Your Richie Allen Radio Show. Let's do it right now, I say. Today.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, Dr. Nick Begich will be live on the programme in the second hour, live from Anchorage in Alaska. I reckon it's been 2 years since we had Nick on the programme. He's a really fascinating man. He spent years researching the effects of modern technology on the human brain, electromagnetic radio frequencies and such like. He's also the author of Angels Don't Play That Harp, and he is a guest host and a regular contributor to InfoWars. His website is earthpulse.com. We'll be talking to Nick about coronavirus and the measures introduced, the lockdown and everything else, and the effects that those are having on people. For how long have we had it now? 3 weeks, is it? And they've been announcing today that it can go on. It will go on for at least 3 more weeks. That's in the UK. Okay, Dr. Nick Begich will be with me, and that, as I said, in the second hour. Before that, there's quite a roundup of news. I've been fascinated more than usual, I think, by some of the things I've been hearing as I've been listening to the programmes I listen to, which is pretty much everything. BBC, obviously the UK media and the US media. Anything I can get my hands on, really. I'm fascinated by the things I'm hearing and reading today. So we'll get into it. There was something I had to say too at the very beginning. Oh yeah. I've noticed in the last couple of days. Now, I'm not sure this is a warning that you need to hear, because I think you're pretty tech savvy. At least I think you are. I think you're pretty useful when it comes to using your computer or your phone. But a lot of internet scams, a lot of email scams have been resurrected in recent days by the usual crime gangs in Europe and elsewhere, sending you various emails. One of the more recent and rather bizarre email scams is for a group of people to figure out one of your old passwords, right? A redundant password. You might have a password. Your mother's name might be Mary, and your father's name might be Thomas, and one of your passwords might be Mary Thomas. And then somebody said to you, that's a bit stupid. That might be easy to figure out. So you dispensed with that password. Now, fraudsters can get access to your old passwords, and they can send you an email saying that they've been spying on you through your webcam, and they know your password, and they will give you the password Mary Thomas. They will say, if you don't send us money, we will embarrass you by contacting all of your contacts. Now, this one has reared its ugly head again, and people are falling for it. And there's another one that's rearing its head. There's another one that's back doing the rounds, and it's the scam where you get an email telling you that there's been an update to the contract. These are phishing scams, you know, because at one time or another, we have contracts, don't we? Car insurance, don't we? Health insurance, life insurance, maybe. You know, there are many types of contracts. And you might click on it to see what the change has been made. Before you know it, you've given access to your computer to somebody else. So these scams are out and about again. A very good friend of mine who works in IT said to me, Richie, warn your listeners, because everybody is locked down and they are indoors, including many people who don't necessarily use a computer for work, mostly for pleasure or for buying things. They're being bombarded with these scams. So be wary of them, right? That's all I'm saying. Right. That's the public service announcement out of the way. Let's crack on with the show. How is the lockdown affecting you? 3 more weeks of it is being announced, I think, right now by the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, in one of these absolutely mundane daily briefings to the press and to the nation. These daily coronavirus briefings. I believe right now, as I speak to you, Raab is telling people it's going to go on for 3 more weeks. And after that, we don't know. We'll have to review it. How do you feel about it? Tweet me. Tweet the bejesus out of me. Some very interesting announcements and pronouncements coming from so-called officials today. Government and medical officials. A lot of interesting announcements and pronouncements. That's what I was talking about at the top of the programme. And we're going to talk about some of those announcements and what they mean this hour. Everywhere today, everywhere, the media is saying the social distancing needs to continue until a vaccine is found for coronavirus. Okay? Okay. That is the UK media's most common headline and talking point today, Thursday, April 16th. Now, we've been saying this on this programme since I came back, haven't we? This notion that they wouldn't entirely return to normal and they would say that we can't until we have the vaccine. Well, they're saying it today. And this is one of several goals of those who are behind this agenda, this hoax. It is a hoax. Don't be under any illusion. Don't take any guff. There's a great word. Don't take any guff from anybody. It is a hoax. Now, I'm not saying there isn't an illness going around. I would be foolish to say that. I'm not saying that there isn't a more acute virus than normal going around. I think that is very possible. I'm very open to it. We get very bad flu seasons every few years. But this is a hoax, this idea that we need to stay home under threat of arrest to stop the spread of the virus. It is a hoax and it is a massive game changer, in my opinion. This is my opinion here now. This is conjecture. Some of it. So goal 1 then, mass vaccination. Remember, post-childhood, I'm 45 now, 45. Don't know how old you are. I'm guessing, what do the statistics tell me? Average listener between 28 and 40, I believe. So the average listener is younger than me. That's nice. Most of us, post-childhood, adults never have any need or use for vaccinations. We don't get them. Maybe tropical diseases. Vaccinations. You might be heading to the Amazon. You might be heading somewhere else. And somebody might say, I tell you what, Baldy Gammon, you might need a shot for malaria. You don't want to get malaria. You don't want to get malaria. Now, I went to spend some time in Costa Rica in 2002. Look it up. Look it up, you ignorant bastard. It's in Central America. And I had a couple of shots before I went. A couple of tequilas. And then I had a couple of vaccinations. Or at least one anyway. I know. I knew nothing then. But I didn't want malaria. So, but most adults, once you've passed 14, 15, I don't know. Vaccinations, not a thing for adults, right? Right. We don't get them. But that's not good enough. They want everybody to be vaccinated. Everybody, all the time. How do we get there? How do you vaccinate the world? Well, I would argue the way to do that is the way they've done it. Inflict a psychological torture of sorts on everybody in the world. Scare them to death with visions of disease and death and lock them down. And they'll do it. They'll do it. They won't like it, but they'll do it. It's mental torture, anxiety, terror, suspicion. What do you mean? Well, terror that they'll get it and die. A lot of people are genuinely terrified. Or their children will get it and die. Genuine. And suspicion that their bastard neighbours are making things worse. And of course we've seen this, haven't we? In recent weeks. In recent days. People twitching the curtains. Pointing. Oh, look at Biddy over there. Look at Biddy. Look, she's gone out 4 times today. I wonder, should I make a phone call just to be on the safe side? They'll do it. It's a horrible way to live. Staying in, not being able to go to the supermarket, not being able to go to the gym, not being able to go to mass, because Father Mulcahy, he gives great mass. I miss the mass that Father Mulcahy gives whenever he's on duty. You can't go to mass, the gym, you can't go to the pub. It's rotten. It's feckin' horrible. But if you offer people a way out of it, the vaccine, they will know their way through a metal bulkhead to take the vaccine. They will know their way through a metal bulkhead the way an able seaman will know his way through a metal bulkhead to get to the one and only Wren that's on HMS, I don't know, Lizzie or whatever, right? They will know their way through metal to get the vaccine. Because, oh Jesus, give me the vaccine, will you? Give me the vaccine. I can't take any more of it. You might find that your BBG, that would be me. I say this in jest. I might be screaming for the vaccine. I can't take much more of this. They'll have your arm off to get the vaccine. And they won't even care that the vaccine is basically digitally tattooed onto your arm in a way that it can be read by anyone with a mobile phone. No, I don't mind. Just get me out of this feckin' lockdown. Give me the thing. Give me 2 of them just in case. Give me 2, 3. That's a massive goal of the elite, right? Vaccinate the world. All adults, post-children, post-teenagers, they don't get vaccines. What'll we do? We'll give them this hoax. And here we are. So it's everywhere today. Professor Neil Ferguson is the man responsible for the lockdown. Imperial College, London, I believe. Boris Johnson's key advisor. He is the man. He's known as Mr. Lockdown. Fucking right? He's Mr. Lockdown. He was talking to the BBC 4 Today programme this morning. And the presenter, Sarah Smith, asks him, when, in the name of Jesus, will we get out of the lockdown? And here he is, Neil Ferguson himself, Mr. Lockdown.
I think that will very much depend on quite how quickly case numbers go down. And that does require us to get on top of things like transmission, both in hospitals and care homes. I think the other thing I'd say is it really requires a single-minded emphasis in government and the health system on scaling up testing and putting in place the ability to track down cases in the community and contact trace. Because without that, our estimates show we have relatively little leeway. If we relax measures too much, then we'll see a resurgence of transmission. What we really need is the ability to put something in their place. If we want to reopen schools, let people get back to work, then we need to keep transmission down in another manner.
Right. You heard him, right? You heard him loud and clear, right? Couldn't have been any clearer, right? When will we get out of lockdown? Gave the answer. What can we replace the lockdown with? What measures? He posed that question. More on that shortly. So she then says to him, any chance of any normal life resuming?
It's not going to be going back to normal.
Not going to be going back to normal.
We will have to maintain some level of social distancing, significant level of social distancing, probably indefinitely until we have a vaccine available.
So you talk about community surveillance and community testing being the only way to move out of the lockdown and allow life to return to something more like normal, if not the way things were before.
Yeah, she's brutal, isn't she? You think the Ginger Ninja is bad on Sky News. She's brutal. He says we won't get back to normal until the vaccine is ready, didn't he? And she didn't pick up on it.
What would that...
Let's hear it again.
It's not going to be going back to normal. We will have to maintain some level of social distancing, significant level of social distancing, probably indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
Until we have a vaccine available.
Until we have a vaccine. This is bombshell, right?
Available.
So you talk about community surveillance and community testing being the only way to move out of the lockdown and allow life to return to something more like...
I mean, that's dreadful. What you do there is you stop him and you say, hang on a second, what do you mean? Indefinitely. Indefinitely. Social distancing until we have a vaccine. You don't really mean, do you, that we'll have to impose social distancing on people for the next 2 years or longer until we have a vaccine? But she just couldn't be arsed. She couldn't bother her arse to do her job. Anyway, she continues.
What would that mean? Would you be talking about testing everybody and more than once, presumably, on a regular basis?
not everybody in the population, but everybody who has any level of respiratory symptoms. They're currently being told to self-isolate, but we would like to move to in my view, we need to move to a system where those people can actually be tested and know whether they are infected. I think that will improve, people's acceptance of those measures of restrictions, but it will also then allow us to trace their immediate contacts. And that can be done partly through the sort of phone apps which have been mentioned in recent days, but we think will also need to be supplemented by, frankly, a small army of people doing manual contact tracing, identifying contacts, and often asking those contacts to isolate as well.
A small army of people tracing contacts, following your movements. Now, sure, we've got facial recognition software now. We have fingerprint scanners already embedded in smartphones, don't we? I don't use mine, and I hope you don't use yours. Facial recognition software, fingerprint scanners, and we have cameras fore and aft on every smartphone. Lovely. No, the media is pretty shite. We all knew that. But it's a bottomless pit, and I didn't realise that. You think the media hits rock bottom. But no, it manages to plumb new depths of ineptitude and corruption. It's shocking. It's so impotent now, the media, that a government health minister can tweet the media, telling the media to stop asking questions about the lockdown. And this is Nadine Dorries. She's a Conservative MP and a health minister. And she tweeted last night, journalists should stop asking questions about an exit strategy. There is only one way we can exit full lockdown, and that is when we have a vaccine. Until then, we need to find ways we can adapt society and strike a balance between the health of the nation and our economy. Shut up asking questions, says Nadine Dorries. I mean, the irony is, of course, when are politicians ever properly scrutinised anymore? So back to the BBC4 Today Show this morning. Nadine Dorries' boss, Matt Hancock, he's the health secretary, he was on the programme and he was being interviewed, yes, by BBC veteran Nick Robinson. And Nadine Dorries' tweet came up. You will hear Nick Robinson first, then you will hear Matt Hancock.
Let's turn to the lockdown now, if we can, and whether and when you tell us how you might ease it, even if you don't exit from it. I was struck that one of your junior ministers has told journalists in a tweet this morning that we should stop asking about the exit strategy. Nadine Dorries says there's only one way we can exit full lockdown, and that's when we have a vaccine. Do you think I should stop asking questions? Because it seems to me that's what many listeners want to hear.
Well, it's interesting you say that's what many of the listeners want to hear. I've been absolutely overwhelmed by the positive response of the public to the measures that we've asked them to take.
But that's a different point, isn't it? They still want to know what the future might look like, even if you can't give them a full picture yet.
Sure, but everybody wants to know what the future looks like. The question is, how do we best get through the crisis, and how do we get that number of deaths, which is still far too high, 761 yesterday, how do we get that number down?
How do we get it down? Right. Here we go. Here's more of it.
Well, ignore my view and ignore the listener's view that you think I might have got wrong. Neil Ferguson came on just before the 8 o'clock news, key scientist, as you know, advising government on this, and said you have to accelerate the work. He said they set up a Brexit department to deal with Brexit. I am not seeing anything like that behind the scenes in government. Why not?
Well, because he advises government. He's not in the government. And the thing is this, Nick, right? And this is a really, really important point. How we communicate as a government, as ministers, has a direct impact on the amount of cases that we have, and therefore the amount of people who die. A direct impact. Because the clarity of messaging that people need to stay at home, because that protects the NHS, because as you said in the intro, this core goal of making sure the NHS isn't overwhelmed, which everybody was telling me a month ago was impossible to achieve, that has been achieved thus far. And that saves lives. This core messaging of stay at home to protect the NHS to save lives, that has a direct impact on how many people follow the the guidelines.
Just
that
so
has
a final brief then,
let me finish the answer.
Yeah, I'd have taken him to the cleaners if I was the presenter there, Nick Robinson. I would have owned him. Robinson's interjection was necessary because Hancock was babbling on and on and on and on and saying nothing. Right? Why are the public not being kept in the loop about discussions to end the lockdown? You have meetings about ending it, presumably. Why aren't you briefing us? Why are you telling us not to ask questions? And why are you screaming at the presenters to let you answer the question when you're not answering the question? This is poor by Robinson. Here's the conclusion of it.
That has a direct impact on the amount of people who have social interactions. That has an impact on the spread of the virus. The communications are part of the policy, and that is why we will not be distracted into confusing that messaging. The scientists can say what they like, the commentators can say what they like, frankly, the interviewers can say what they like, but we will do what is best by dealing with this virus.
Understood, he said. Understood. He was basically told by Matt Hancock to go and fuck himself. Basically. Okay, it's coarse language, I agree. But that's what Hancock basically said to him. I'll do whatever I like. I don't care what journalists have to say or what questions you've got. You can go and fuck yourself. And Dick Robinson said, understood. Understood. He was grovelling like George Galloway to Rula Lenska. It's shocking. Here's the conclusion.
Understood. Final brief sentence. What I was trying to do is interrupt you to get some clarity on this. I think...
He's floundering there, Robinson. He's horrified. But yet he doesn't have the balls to go after Hancock when he should be tearing him a new arsehole.
What I was trying to do is interrupt you to get some clarity on this. I think what you're saying, and if you wouldn't mind briefly just say it, you think if you were to talk about what you're considering behind the scenes, that would send the wrong message to people. You just want them to focus on staying at home until you've really got a package to unveil. Is that what you're saying?
That is exactly the reasoning behind why we...
Good boy, Nick. Good boy. Good boy.
Frustrate you and...
There. Do you want a treat? I've got some Bonio biscuits for you.
Others who want to know exactly what the next stage will be. We talk about what is needed now, and then when we need to change that, we will.
Matt Hancock, thank you very much indeed.
What you've heard there is fascism in motion. Melodrama? No. That's fascism. That's fascism. The public are too thick to understand what we are doing. You are not to ask any questions, because frankly, Nick, dear, go fuck yourself. This is the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford, Greater Manchester, on Thursday, April 16th, 2020, and it is hot, goddammit. This is the wonderful Chrissy Hind and the Pretenders. The time is exactly 26 minutes past 5. Great to be with you. Welcome to the show. The Pretenders, don't get me wrong, on your Richie Allen Radio Show. Thanks for all your tweets and all of that. Lovely to hear from you. Lovely. I love hearing from you. It's a lovely thing. It's a remarkable thing. It's as fresh to me today as it was 20 years ago. The fact that somebody would bother to listen and then bother their hairy backside to send a comment. I'm humbled by it. Thank you for engaging with me and with the programme. Let me tell you this. Do you want to giggle? Because you have to laugh. It's warm out there. Warm it is. Do you want to giggle? UNICEF is apparently very, very, very worried that children are not getting their vaccines in the lockdown. Right. So again, let's return to the BBC Radio 4 Today programme, Thursday edition. Guy called Dr. Doug Brown. Now, Doug represents the British Immunology Society. Their meetings must be gas. Right? Must be great crack. How do you apply for membership? Can I be a member of the British Immunology Society? Let's sit around and talk about immunisation. Lovely. I wonder, did they do day trips in buses, do they? Anyway, Dr. Doug Brown, Dougie Brown, was on to chat about the fact that UNICEF is really worried that kids are not getting their vaccinations. Nick Robinson is again in the driving seat. He's the presenter. Sure, this is gas crack indeed, so it is, be Jesus.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the coronavirus pandemic that's ongoing at the moment is a priority, and it's a very difficult time, both for people in the general population, but also for healthcare. But we are concerned that we could see a further decline in uptake of childhood vaccinations because of the necessary lockdown measures that are in place. We've seen for the last 4 years those uptake rates decline. We've seen increase in measles cases, and we're well below the recommended uptake that the World Health Organization suggests of 95%. So we really can't afford to see these uptake rates slip even.
It's a thorny issue indeed, isn't it? We've locked all the kiddies down. We've told them horror stories. My neighbour, this is true, I swear on it. He's got he's got a couple of boys and a very young girl. The girl is terrified, listening to the news, which is on in everybody's house 24 hours a day. Children are absolutely terrified. Yeah, properly terrified of it. This invisible enemy that could kill them, that could kill their grandparents. So we've locked down the kiddies, scared the bejesus out of them. And it's a thorny issue, all right, because now we're struggling to get them out of the house, into the GP's office, to stick another vaccine in them. Right.
Slip even further.
It's fucking vaudeville, right?
Concern that people think the NHS is overstretched so that they shouldn't bother their doctor, or that they're worried that if they do go to the doctor, they might come across someone who could infect them or their children.
Well, there could be multiple reasons, and what we want to be doing is really keep the importance of childhood vaccinations in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
Vaccine services are still open for business, and they are still being given in their community through their GP surgery. So we are urging parents to contact their GP if their child is due a vaccination. And of course, if the parent or the child is in the high-risk group, or that family are displaying symptoms of coronavirus, then they should discuss this with their GP and try and find out the best way and time to access that vaccination. But these services are open for business, and we would urge parents to access them and see their child vaccinated.
Yeah, he said it twice. Did you hear that twice? You must have heard it.
Vaccine services are still open for business, and they are still being given.
Yeah, and?
These services are open for business, and we would urge parents to access them and see their child vaccinated.
Big Pharma is open for business. We haven't gone anywhere. Come and get your vaccines. Don't worry about the coronavirus. No big deal. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Oh, Jesus. And business is going to get a whole lot better too, isn't it? Nick Robinson is really worried about the poor people in the third world. Their kids. Nick Robinson is old enough to have said the black babies. I bet you he did at one time or another. He's very worried about third world countries and their children. Because that's our business, you see. What you're hearing is an infomercial. This is not a news item. It's an infomercial on the BBC. I hope Big Pharma is paying them, at the very least anyway. If you're going to sell your soul, make it for something good. Although, if Nick Robinson... No, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. So he's worried about the kiddies.
It isn't the case, is it, in developing countries always, that the vaccination services are still running. That is one of the reasons UNICEF seems so worried.
Why did they say developing countries? It's a wonderful benign term, isn't it? It's terminological. It's actually terminological inexactitude. Developing countries. Why don't they just tell the truth? Countries that we fucked over for centuries. Countries that we raped, robbed, plundered, sacked, and bombed the bejesus out of. Rather than call them developing countries, I'd have more respect for the presenter. I'd say fair play to you. That's how I would introduce it. Dr. Doug, what about the countries that we basically fucking ruined for the last century or two? How are they coping with the vaccines? Anyway, it's a good question. It's a good question.
It isn't the case, is it, in developing countries always, that the vaccination services are still running. That is one of the reasons UNICEF seems so worried.
That's correct, and there was some a recommendation from the World Health Organization released just this week, which is saying that if vaccination services can't be delivered at this point, then catch-up programs need to be in place. It's absolute
catch-up programs. The alarm bells should be ringing. Woo! Catch-up programs. So after all this 16 to 18 months of lockdown, or at least social separation, social distancing, that's the one, social distancing, we'll have catch-up programs. So that's where we really put your child in danger. So we'll bring little Billy in and we'll say, well, let's give him 4 or 5 in a row now. He has to catch up, you see. He couldn't come and see us because of COVID-19. Alarm bells should be ringing in every household in this country, but they won't be, because the truly perplexed haven't even got a Scooby-Doo. What's really going on? Catch-up programs.
Absolutely key that we do see vaccinations delivered, not just in the UK, but globally. Vaccinations save between 1 to 2 million lives globally.
Bullshit.
Per year, which is why we at the British Society for Immunology launched a Celebrate Vaccines campaign just 2 weeks ago to...
We're going to be clapping for vaccines next. They launched the Celebrate Vaccines program. I didn't come across that. Probably because of coronavirus, we didn't hear about it. But that'll be it now. You won't be clapping for physical people in the future. You'll be clapping for inanimate objects, like syringes full of pus and shit and aborted fetal cells. Let's clap for vaccines tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Let's all stand out like fucking retards, banging our pots and pans for vaccines. Yeah. BBC.
To remind people of the importance of vaccines, and there's lots of information on our website about how important they are and how they work, but we're also supporting the...
There's no evidence. There's lots of information on our website at the British Immunology Society about how vaccines work. What we've neglected to put on our society is what Bill Gates did in India. Paralysed 500,000 children. You know, that isn't conjecture, by the way. So I know that you over there, I can see you. I know you're new to the programme. I know you are. I know you were directed to the programme. And I know you think that this is horse shit conspiracy theory. But listen to me. Listen up. Listen up. Hey, come here. Paddy, over there, you. It's fucking true. He paralysed 500,000 children. He should be in jail for the rest of his life. It should be the case that Bill Gates would be terrified to cross the border, Pakistan, to cross into India. He should be arrested and charged, found guilty, and put in prison for the rest of his life. But you won't find that information on the British Immunology Society's website. These are wonderful times, these.
International Gavi initiative to...
What was that? What? Hang on.
Also supporting the International Gavi initiative to ensure that they can raise about $8 billion to continue to deliver these vaccines in low and middle income countries.
Ah, now I know why he hasn't put on his website that Bill Gates' vaccines paralysed 500,000 Indian children. Because the British Immunology Society, I can't say this without genuinely laughing, is supporting Gavi. And Gavi is the vaccine alliance that was set up by Bill and Melinda Gates. What you just heard there on the BBC, which you pay for if you're stupid enough to pay the TV licence, what you heard was an infomercial for Big Pharma, free of charge. It's wonderful. The goals: mass vaccination for everybody, not just for children. Everyone. And you won't be able to travel anywhere, let alone assemble. You won't be able to go to a film, a concert, because you won't have the digital mark that can be read by the smartphone. You ain't going anywhere. You ain't going anywhere. All of this stuff has been brought in. All of the technology was brought in. You thought it was a wonderful thing when you went to see Neil Diamond at the Manchester Arena with me. We were delighted. We went to see Neil Diamond and we didn't have a ticket. We had a barcode on our fucking smartphone. We thought it was brilliant, didn't we? Didn't we? Oh, this is wonderful, this. This is wonderful. We don't have any tickets anymore. No physical ticket that you can keep as a keepsake. You just open your email and they'll scan the barcode and they'll say, get in, and enjoy Neil Diamond. And we thought all this technology is amazing. That technology wasn't designed to make it easier for you to get in to see fucking Neil Diamond. That technology was invented for them to scan your body and determine whether or not you have the up-to-date recommended vaccine schedule, if it's in you. And if it's not in you, you can't come in. But I've waited 20 years to see Dolly Parton. Oh, I'd love to see Dolly Parton live. 20 years I've waited. Tough shit. And there's no time now for you to go and get a vaccine. They've turned the country into a police state with the click of a finger, overnight. Tearing up laws, constitutions, human rights declarations, all in the name of keeping you safe. Well, we're only doing it for you now. But you've rolled civil liberties back 700 fucking years. But listen, it's in your best interest. By the way, the Dolly Parton reference. We've got loads of Dolly on. I love Dolly on vinyl. If you do get your TV through Sky, watch Brian Johnson from AC/DC spending a few days with Dolly Parton, talking to her about her life and her career. It's even better than the 50th anniversary special. It's amazing. Brian Johnson is a brilliant interviewer, even though he never did it before in his life. Brilliant. Dolly, I love Dolly. Love to go to Dollywood. Dollywood. Get on a Dolly coaster. Yeah. And after I get on the Dolly coaster, have a drink that I can rest on a Dolly coaster. Dollywood, eh? Dollywood. Now, so to turn the country into a fucking police state, Tucker Carlson drew attention to this last night on Fox News. He had the governor of New Jersey on, a guy called Phil Murphy. Phil Murphy. Now, if you followed the lockdown measures in the United States, you will know that the New Jersey police have been pretty brutal. You know, they've not been gently easing people through this. They've been brutal in cracking down on people. So Tucker Carlson interviews New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, and their conversation is really interesting.
So why, back a couple of weeks ago, you closed state parks and people have been arrested for using them. A man was arrested for sitting alone on the beach. Tell me why that poses a danger. And again, on what scientific basis did you make that decision?
Yeah, so Tucker, we were coming into both warm weather and big religious seasons. It was Passover first, then Easter. We've got Ramadan coming up shortly. And certain of the counties were beginning to close their parks. And the concern was that the folks who couldn't go to their normal park would go to another park, another county or a state park. And it wasn't just a gut feel. We then surveilled the state, up and down the state on that first weekend of April when we had some good weather in New Jersey. And in fact, that was just what we saw. Lots of people congregating, lots of out-of-state license plates. So it was a step, trust me, I took no joy in taking that step. But it's one that we felt we had to take. And as I mentioned to a bunch of legislators today, it's not a life sentence.
Go after him, Tucker, because he's not answering the question.
Okay, but on what basis? What scientific? Because I'm just trying to get to the science here, because I assume all of us are following the lead of epidemiologists. Arresting someone for sitting alone on the beach, tell me how that arrests the spread of the coronavirus from an epidemiological point of view.
Yes, Tucker. Got to stick on them. You got to ride them like a rodeo bull. Don't let them get away. What's the epidemiological evidence for arresting some bloke who's sitting in a park or on a beach all by himself? Phil Murphy?
Yeah, I wasn't referring to that. I actually don't have the specifics as to why that happened. I meant congregation at state and county parks, of which there was an enormous amount when the weather got warm. And the fact that folks weren't, it's not that they couldn't be in the park and jogging by themselves or walking on their own and keeping distance. They weren't. And there were a lot of out-of-state license plates in the parking lots, and we've got some of the nicest parks in the Northeast, if not the country. Again, it brings me no joy, but we felt that was the right decision to make.
So you made that decision, and as I noted before, 15 congregants at a synagogue in New Jersey were arrested and charged for being in a synagogue together. Now, the Bill of Rights, as you well know, protects Americans' right, enshrines their right to practice their religion as they see fit and to congregate together, to assemble peacefully. By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order?
Yes, that's a very good question. And Phil Murphy is going to rage fuck his assistant for putting him on the Tucker Carlson show in the first place. I'm not here to answer these questions. What is he talking about, the Bill of Rights? This is good stuff.
Synagogue together. Now, the Bill of Rights, as you well know, protects Americans' right, enshrines their right to practice their religion as they see fit and to congregate together, to assemble peacefully. By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order? How do you have the power to do that?
That's above my pay grade, Tucker. So I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this. We went to first of all, we looked at the data and the science, and it says people have to stay away from each other. That's the best thing we could do to break the back of the curve of this virus.
Now, Tucker could jump in there if he wanted to. But to be fair to Tucker, he doesn't have the experience that I've had. I've presented more radio shows than Tucker. And I've produced more radio shows than Tucker. I'm not saying I'm a better presenter than Tucker Carlson. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying a little bit of inexperience there. He should have jumped in there and said, hang on a second, don't mention the science to me, because 40 seconds ago you admitted that you don't know anything about the epidemiological science. When I asked you, why were you arresting a guy who was on a beach on his own? What's the epidemiological evidence? You said you didn't know anything about it. So don't talk science now, is what Tucker should have said to him. But Tucker's been nice to him. All right, fair enough.
Of this virus that leads to lower hospitalizations and ultimately fatalities.
And I'm not contesting that, though. I think I do think there's a debate. This is a rolling conversation because we're learning new things every day, and nothing is settled at this point.
Understood.
But I do want, since you are an elected official, a leader in the government, an executive, how do you have the authority to order something that so clearly contravenes the Bill of Rights of the United States, the U.S. Constitution? Where do you get the authority to do that?
Very good, Tucker. These are very serious issues. I mentioned it earlier on, the ripping up of human rights law, of natural law, of common law, Bill of Rights, constitutions. Right, I'm not talking about the UK, but everywhere. How did you do that? Did you consult anybody? Was there a fucking referendum that I wasn't aware of? How did you manage to do it? Good boy, Tucker. What does NJ, Governor, New Jersey, Phil Murphy, say?
Do that.
Well, here's the thing. We
Oh, Jesus, huh?
need to stay away from each other, number one. Number two, we do have broad authority within the state. And number three, we would never do that without coordinating, discussing, and hashing it out with the leaders, the variety of the leaders of the faiths in New Jersey. We are among, if not the most diverse state in America,
I'm sure that you talk to every rabbi and priest, but there's a deeper question here, and I'm just going to ask you one last time because I think it's important. I'm sure you've thought about this. You can't just, as the governor of a state, tell people who they can talk to when and where, because the Constitution of the United States, upon which all of this is based, prohibits you from doing that. So you clearly decided that you could do it. Did you consult an attorney about this? Did you? I mean, because this is a legal question as well as a medical one, isn't it?
I don't go to the men's room without consulting an attorney, so I guarantee you we did that. But I'll give you an example that was not related to the synagogue.
No, you won't give me an example. Hang on a second. So you're saying you consulted an attorney then? Again, this is Tucker's inexperience. He's not experienced. He's done a lot of television, Tucker, I'll give you that, but he's not experienced enough. He's just said I consulted an attorney. You really have to grab him by the balls there and say, who? Who did you consult?
Governor of a state, tell people who they can talk to when and where, because the Constitution of the United States, upon which all of this is based, prohibits you from doing that. So you clearly decided that you could do it. Did you consult an attorney about this? Did you? I mean, because this is a legal question as well as a medical one, isn't it?
I don't go to the men's room without consulting an attorney, so I guarantee you we did that. But I'll give you an example that was not related to the synagogue.
No, don't give us any example. Which attorney of record, which legal firm did your consultation for you on whether or not you could rip up the Bill of Rights and arrest some people in a synagogue? Saturday morning, 15 people go to the synagogue, mostly from the same family. Where do you get the balls to go and arrest them? Where did you get the authority? Which lawyer? Which law firm? Tucker lets him away with it.
Synagogue. I called up Cardinal Tobin, Cardinal Joe Tobin in Newark. There are 5 or 6...
Cardinal Joe Tobin, a protector of paedophiles. I'm not interested. We can talk about him at some time in the future. Forget about that. Who gave you the authority? Which lawyer? And what part of the law are they using as the basis for ripping up the Bill of Rights? How did they enable you to do it?
Archdiocese in New Jersey was coming up to Easter and Holy Week in particular. And I said, listen, I'm really concerned.
I don't care what you said to Joe Tobin. I couldn't give a fuck which lawyers told you you could rip up the Bill of Rights.
About drive-through Holy Communion, because we had heard some...
Drive-through Holy Communion, fucking hell.
Because we had heard some stories about priests who unwittingly had the virus and unwittingly...
Give us a Big Mac and a filet-o-fish, please. Give us 2 strawberry milkshakes and the body of Christ.
He passed it on to parishioners, and he said, we're not doing that. I promise you, and I'll confirm that with my fellow bishops. That's not denying someone their right to worship in any way.
Very inexperienced Tucker there, isn't he? Just jump in, man. Say, stop waffling, will you? Shut up. I asked you about the lawyer.
We have to find a different way to worship. And I think that's the point. God bless America.
Yeah, we're not. Government's not allowed to tell
way.
people how to worship. Just as a sort of factual matter. Last question, sincere question. So these orders, which again I'm presuming and I believe were taken in good faith under trying circumstances, have nevertheless, and you just said it, have resulted in an awful lot of suffering. 577,000 New Jerseyans on unemployment. Doubtless the suicide rate will increase. The addiction rate will increase. Liquor stores are open, as we noted. How much does that weigh on you? That the suffering that this lockdown has caused might equal or perhaps outweigh what the virus does. Do you think about that?
It weighs heavily, and you ask yourself every day, are you making the right decision? And the answer is this. Twofold, Tucker. One is we continue to make every call based on the facts, the data, the science, as best we can. And secondly, I look at what we're doing versus the alternative. And I know that the alternative, had we stepped back and let this virus run amok, 3+ million people in our state would have been infected, and the healthcare system would have had no chance to have kept up with that, and the fatalities would have been multiple.
Yeah. But how do you know that, Governor? You told me a while back you don't understand any of the science. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A number of you are tweeting about the vaccine. You're not going to have it. And you're right to say that you're not going to have it. And I believe you. And I wish you well with that, because they're going to make life unbearable without it. That's the plan. They'll make life near well enough unlivable unless you have it. In terms of your access to life, you know, that's how it's going to be. Well, that's the kind of life it's going to be. And in the very near future, we'll all obey. We'll all obey. I won't be around, but everybody else will obey. Right? Apps. Applications for mobile phones. This is all the rage today, yesterday, Monday, Tuesday. Now, an app, if you don't know, is a program is that you download for your smartphone. Everything has an app these days. You've got a screen on your smartphone, and there are little square things on the screen, little icons. Those are the apps. You press the app and it opens up. For example, the BBC News has an app. You could download that. I've got the BBC News app on my phone. I've got lots of them, Daily Mail, Reuters, and I press on it and I get the latest according to them. An app. So we're going to have apps very soon. Apps, voluntary allegedly. Ones that you don't have to have if you don't want to. Apps that will tell you when you have been in contact with a sick person and that you need to go home and stay home. Like I said, the perplexed or the galactically stupid will say, well, they're voluntary. You don't have to have them. But as I said, sports, films, concerts, the park, the gym, your workplace, off limits. You need to have the tech. You need to have the vaccine. You need to have the tech. On the app, here's BBC tech editor, a guy called Leo Kellyan.
So the idea of this is an app that you would have to download. This is something that the NHS is testing with people at the moment. The app on your phone detects other people that you've been into close proximity with for maybe up to 10 minutes, raising the risk that were they to have coronavirus, that you might be infected. The idea is you end up with a database of all the people who you've been close to. As soon as one of those people uses the app to identify themselves, maybe they've got the symptoms, suddenly that database can then be used to alert everybody else who's using the app, who came into contact with that person, that they too maybe now need to go into quarantine for a period. And the idea of this is you launch this app as you start to ease the lockdown. And it means that what you're trying to do is stop new infections being able to spread, because as soon as somebody has identified themselves as being ill and warned everybody else who might have caught it, all those people go away and then into their homes and can't infect the wider population. The issue here is how many people are going to be willing to download and use the app on their phone. It's not just that.
They'll all be willing to do it, Leo, when they realise that there are real-world consequences for not doing it, son. This is the whole laughable aspect of the voluntary claims. It's voluntary. Yeah, but if you don't have it, right?
It's not just downloading it, it's making sure that the app is active and being used, and then pay attention to the alerts if they're telling them that they've got to go back and put themselves back into quarantine for a
Pay
period.
attention! Schnell! Achtung! Your mobile phone is beeping. They'll even have a distinguishable, a very distinctive ringtone or an alarm, so that everybody else in the room will know that you've just been told to get the feck home. I know, I can't believe I'm saying it myself, because it sounds preposterous. Well, it used to sound preposterous for many, many years, when the learned folks were warning us that this was going to happen. It did sound preposterous. But it's here now. You over there. Did I hear a sound on your mobile phone? You might have been infected. Yeah. What are you going to do? Nick Begich is joining me, hopefully, in a few minutes' time. He hasn't signed in yet, but that's okay. And in the meantime, here's the music from the Waterboys. I think the heat's gone to me head. Because it's pretty warm in studio Richie Allen Show Towers here in Salford in Greater Manchester. The brilliant Mike Scott, the Hold of the Moon, back with you in 3.5 minutes. This is your Richie Allen radio show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester. The time is 6:01. It is Thursday's programme, the last live programme of the week. Don't forget, later on this evening, the Trigger Warning crew will be live from around about 10:30 p.m. That's UK time. That is Graham Booth and Hayden Hewitt. For more information, triggerwarning.tv. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/triggerwarningtv. Around about 10:30, but I could be wrong. Check them out. Alrighty. I love my guest today. He was very kind to me, about 10, 11 years ago, back when I began doing this type of program. A free program. A program. When I say free, a program free to discuss and explore anything. When I unshackled myself from the news desk of commercial radio, I said, I want to talk about things. My guest was very kind. He used to come on with me regularly. He's a bit of a genius. He's been researching for many years the effects of modern technology on the human brain. Things like electromagnetic radio frequencies. He wrote an outstanding read, which I think is as prescient today as it ever was. The book Angels Don't Play That Harp. And these days, you can find him often as a guest host, but also a regular contributor to Infowars.com, which is massive, as you know. To find out more about him, his own website is earthpulse.com. Let's welcome back to the program, live from Alaska, our friend Dr. Nick Begich. Nick, you are very welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. So good to be with you guys again in the UK and around the world. It's a pretty crazy time out there. That's for sure. But I'm always glad to be talking with you, and always glad to be sharing a few moments of time with people around the world on really important issues.
Thanks, Nick, and I have to apologise publicly for letting you down last week. Nick was booked in last week, and like the gentleman that he is, even though he's busy, he turned up, but I'd made a complete, as we say in Ireland, I made a balls of it. I put the entry this Thursday in the diary because I'm an idiot. But thanks for your humility and for not telling me to go and take a jump off a cliff, which other people would have done. This is going to sound like a stupid question and very juvenile, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's happening, Nick? Have we arrived somewhere? Is this really, have we arrived at some crucial point in human history right now?
I think actually just the way in which this thing is shaped up and is now being perceived and acted on, no doubt about it. I think we're in a very, very dangerous period, quite frankly. Because there's two sides to this. You can talk about the pandemic side, and I've heard, as you have, lots of different theories about what that is. But the more important thing is actually the effect. I mean, you there in the UK are feeling it. I'm here in Alaska, and the things that are happening here are pretty significant, and the after effects are going to be even worse. Economically, the other side of the coin is the economic side, and a lot of death, a lot of bad news will come of that as well, and we're feeling that here, and I think around the world, and I think that will continue actually. As much as the stock markets are being rallied and a lot of money from every central bank is starting to flood into the markets, that's really a short-term prop up for a really nasty situation as I see it rolling out.
Watched an excellent presentation you did for Alex and the crew on the economic effects of it, and let's spend a bit of time on that in a moment. But as to the pandemic itself, I kind of have half of an idea what you'll say to me, because I know what your areas of expertise are, and I know you're very honest, and you do say to me from time to time over the years, Richie, I'm not an expert in this or in that, and I do like that, but you will have theories. Of course you will, because you're a smart guy, you're an educated guy, as to what it is, Nick, and whether the lockdown, as we are experiencing it was ever really necessary. What do you think is going on? A very bad flu? A genuinely deadly virus? What's your instinct on this?
Well, I see it as a deadly virus, obviously. I mean, you're stacking up bodies in places where they don't normally stack up. I mean, so that's a real deal as it's happening. Now, thinking about it from a political perspective a little bit, and thinking about the leader of China, and I've read press reports on him as an individual, and people can look this up, but three of his heroes are Mao, Stalin, and Hitler. And the reason he likes those guys from his those reports was that they didn't have any resistance to killing millions of people to accomplish their political ends. And it's kind of the voice he had in college. That was his view of the world. So to sacrifice perhaps a few million of his own people in order to accomplish political ends globally, hey, would he do it if the opportunity presented itself? Yes, he would. Of course he would. And whether this thing was triggered purposefully or accidentally isn't relevant, because here's why. No matter who you are in the world, whether the United States, the UK, China, Israel, whoever you are, you've gamed out what would you do if a pandemic hit. And you can read a May 2010 report from the Rockefeller Foundation, and I'll grab it off my desk as I'm talking to you, because it predicted pandemic models. And when it didn't just predict these models would come and go. They would have lasting, long-term effects. I'm not laying my hands on that one, but this is the story on that. It's a May 2010 report. When you look at that report and you think about what's going on, the economic factors, the political opportunities all presented themselves. And so bad actors will look at this and go, wow, what can I do to exploit the opportunity? China is certainly no different, and they actually plan ahead. They don't deal with tomorrow's news. They deal with the next century's news and plan accordingly. So when I think about this circumstance that we're all in, the opportunities for bad actors are huge. And I keep saying, watch the peripheral on this, because opportunity to do things both on the bad side and quite frankly on what some might call the good side, the opportunity for big changes it come at these times because when the public is panicked, it's easy to move in certain ways that otherwise would be strongly resisted. And that's where we are right at this very moment.
That's a valid theory, that. I don't know, so I do not know. I never claimed to know. I was fascinated to be speaking yesterday to Paul Craig Roberts, who, again, would have been over the years a regular contributor to InfoWars. I like Paul. And Paul, like yourself, will throw and juggle a few theories in the air and see which one fits. And Paul wrote brilliantly this week about Francis Boyle, who was the man that actually wrote the legislation for the Biowarfare Convention that became law in the United States in the late 80s, when the United States agreed not to develop biological weapons. But Francis Boyle is saying this year that the US has been violating that for years, and in fact has over 10,000 scientists working on biowarfare all the time. And Paul believes that there is some evidence, he doesn't say it's a fact now, there's some evidence that agents of US intelligence were actually funding research into this virus in Wuhan. And all of that sort of stuff confuses me. I'm not trying to dismiss your theory that the Chinese accidentally or deliberately did it, but I'm saying there's also evidence, at least circumstantial evidence, that the United States intelligence agencies could have had its dirty hands in it as well. And the reason I say that, Nick, is because you talked about cui bono, who benefits. Well, the Bill Gates Foundation benefits, right?
Right.
And
right.
So what am I to believe? You made a very plausible argument there, and I can't discount it. But then I look at Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and he says, well, maybe we had something to do with it. These are strange times. How does anybody know what is an authoritative source anymore in 2020? These are terrible questions.
Well, that's a big point as well. The credible sources that we used to rely on aren't credible. The news media, the general news media, the mainstream news media hasn't been credible for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is open your local paper and you'll see that the only news appears to be this virus and everything associated with it. Yet we were on the brink of World War III. There were droughts in North Africa and the Middle East headed for China and Pakistan. There were fires and climate change, and Greta was screaming, and there was disaster everywhere. And all that's gone, it just evaporated off the face of the earth and has been exchanged for a virus. When we think about the news media, they are the most irresponsible informers on the planet because they have created in every one of these instances a panic party when calm was required. And they continue to do it and look for angles to create fear and anxiety in the public. And I think they have become the most destructive force on the planet besides the politicians who feed on the same fuel of fear. And this has been the root of a problem in this country and around the world for way, way too long, is to take fear and turn it against the population, which is happening on steroids right now. And the amount of death created by that, call it the inverse placebo effect. 30% of the people are healed miraculously by good thought. And I would suggest 30% are killed by the kind of emotion that's running rapid right now. And inflaming already inflamed immune systems to the point of collapsing people that are already weakened. So when you add the fear on top of the actual virus, you're going to get a worse effect. And when you add everything else on in terms of opportunistic, rotten people that aren't thinking very well, then we have damage being done by globalists and political actors and big players that don't like to lose and love to win.
Well said, Nick. Nick can be read at earthpulse.com, by the way, and as I mentioned, is a regular guest and often guest hosts on Infowars.com. It's a great setup there you've got in Alaska. Earthpulse.com. I'd like to talk about positive thought a bit later on. Isn't it incredible to you? I mean, whether the Chinese left this out of the laboratory by accident or whether it was deliberate or whether it was the United States intelligence agencies or the French or the British or the Israelis, if we leave all that to one side for a minute, how our agencies in our countries have, as you just alluded to, how they have sought to capitalise on it, Isn't that astonishing? Isn't it astonishing to be hearing the mayor of Los Angeles tell people snitches don't get stitches, snitches get rewards, inform on your neighbours? And I even heard the governor of New Jersey on Fox News last night trying to justify arresting people who are sitting on a beach on their own or busting up people praying at a synagogue in New Jersey. Has that even taken you by surprise, Nick? You know?
Yeah, actually, it all has, because it's happened so rapidly and without the appropriate declarations. You know, martial law is a constitutionally provided provision, but you don't do it very often. But hey, we're all locked in our houses. What's the difference, you know? And when you think about this kind of a scenario, and I did find that report, and it was actually the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And the partners were the GBN Global Business Network. And these guys put this together, you know, in the scenario, one of the scenarios, and these are supposedly fictional scenarios. Now, why I bring that up is a couple of things. You want to talk about a little bit of a conspiracy here. Let's talk about this one. Is the Rockefeller Foundation was founded in 1913, the same year that they founded the income tax, and they amended the U.S. Constitution so that you could collect an income tax, which prior to that, our U.S. Supreme Court said an income tax, a tax on wages, was slavery and unconstitutional. That was ruled by our U.S. Supreme Court in the late 1890s. So they had a constitutional change, the amendment of 1913, same time Rockefeller Foundation formed, and they created nonprofits so that they could exclude themselves from taxation by moving big blocks of wealth into nonprofit structures where they could influence political outcomes and do it tax-free and do it behind the scenes, like what Gates does with the World Health Organization. He's the biggest private donor. He tells them what to do. As you know, the vice premier of Japan called the World Health Organization the Chinese Health Organization. That was the vice premier of Japan. Look it up. And the reason he said that is for the same reason that you hear Trump criticizing the World Health Organization now for telling him not to shut down the borders in late January like he was trying to do. They are in the way and they represent the wrong interests. And when you look at how these globalists behave, what did Bill Gates do? He resigned his boards, his active economic boards. He went to his nonprofits because he did the same thing, transferred vast amounts of wealth into nonprofits where he could influence global policy. And any more than Donald Trump is an MD, neither is he. You know, but he's regulating more on world health than any MD on the planet right now. Now, is that appropriate? A lot of people don't think so. The dashboard that he created to track these kind of viruses is one that's being used by Johns Hopkins. It was developed in partnership with them. They ran a program 2000, I think it was 201, to look at a pandemic, and they kind of gamed it out last fall in October. Is it a coincidence? Well, maybe so. But when you start to read this stuff and you look at it, you could say so. But you could also say it was a conspiracy. And here's what I would say. The guy was, when they wrote the plan, whether it was this plan I referenced of the Rockefeller Foundation Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development, or whether it was someone else's plan. But they all roll out a plan based on disasters that they know they can then take advantage of because the fear factor is off the charts. And there's a split in consciousness here. And this is a very important point. Fear and anxiety and all that emotional energy is powerful. It creates reality. See, when you shove emotional energy behind thought and someone else is running the thought stream and not you, you get things created. You create what you see in the world today. On the other hand, on the other side of emotion, you get those things going and you create differently, you see, because then you individually create, because sovereignly, as you gain empathy, love, the positive emotions of compassion, you look at brain activity, it becomes coherent. The creative side and the analytical side begin to work together. The emotional side and the analytical side begin to create together, but you direct the creation instead of being herded by fear and anxiety or the negative emotions. You see, negative emotions herd you like animals. And that's not what we are. We're created human beings, created in the image and likeness of God in my belief structure. And so the other needs to happen. We need to lead with compassion, with empathy, with love, not with tolerance, but with acceptance, because tolerance is a self-hatred form of shutting up and being politically correct.
Yeah.
And we need truth now. We need reality now, and we need to recognize what we individually are now, not to evolve into something, but to just simply remember what we are as created beings and begin acting way differently and taking our governments back way differently than the way that others might project this happening in the 21st century.
Back to Gates. I love that about thought and about fear and what it does. We talked about this before, the last time you were on. But just back to Gates for a moment. Paul Craig Roberts said to me yesterday, Gates is insane. He might well be, I don't know. Do you go along? I mean, these are the things that, but when I first started out doing this type of program, I would have interviewed Alex a lot. I mean, he would have come on with me when I was in Spain, around about the time that you and I met. I would have had Alex on quite a lot. And Alex, we would talk about these things, about, changing humanity, changing people physiologically. And we look at Gates and the vaccines, and people talk about the money, and they get fixated on the money and the billions. But is there any possibility that there's something else going on with the vaccines?
The money, when they have billions, the money is irrelevant, you see. Yeah. It's about outcomes. It's about what you do in the world. It's about how you project yourself in the world, because these guys have reached a level of what they see as self-actualization in the purest form, and they are doing it, you see. They are doing it. They recognize what they are, and they're doing it, unlike most people who could do the same thing, quite frankly, but they don't think they can, so they don't, because that's what, that's how it works. Yeah. But when I look at these guys, every big player, they act in their own self-interest. Everybody does. Everybody does. Now, that doesn't mean the interests are necessarily selfish. There are some people that do have a benevolent view of the world. All right. Now, does he or doesn't he? I don't know the answer to that because I don't know him personally. And I tend to not attack individuals. I tend to attack ideas and methodologies and things that are happening, because people can, then discern who the players are without getting all personal about it. And this is where some of the guys and I kind of part ways, because here's what I see. A directed and controlled society is fundamentally flawed. And when I hear the Bill Gates of the world telling me or anyone else that they want to track every movement of every human being, I say that guy is deceived, and that guy has missed the boat of what liberty is truly about, and he needs a lesson in liberty. Hopefully he'll find it, because he's so immune from what most people go through on a daily basis, worrying about whether they're going to eat, whether their paycheck is coming through. In America, 58% of the people before this thing started had less than $1,000 in savings. These guys at that high of a level don't have a clue what the average person is feeling right now or understanding right now. And yet they're taking advantage of it in some kind of an abstract way, taking advantage of it. So when I think of the Bill Gateses and I think of the Rockefellers and I think of these people, because I've met many people of that caliber in terms of wealth, there are many really good people. But there are some really bad actors, and there are some people that don't know what they're doing and are behaving badly. And I would say that happens more often than not, because most people don't game out some evil plan and go, well, I'm going to go do evil in the world. They don't do it that way. They come to some conclusion based on whatever their thinking is, and they do it. And in this case, liberty's at stake. Let's talk about where it also is at stake in this. Now, every time you go to the store, and I know you're feeling the same way as I did recently when I went to the grocery store and I'm exchanging currency, and then you get that sort of hesitation, like, should I do this? Right?
Right.
Well, I never had that hesitation before. And so you've got the UN saying we need digital money to protect us from this. In fact, a lot of people haven't bothered to notice, but the International Bank of International Settlements, it's the big one, Bank of International Settlements, is 600 of the world's biggest banks from 60 countries who are calling for a digital currency right now. And Pelosi tried to slip it into the $2.3 trillion package to make that possible so we could get away from this filthy lucre we call money. Now, you think about that for a moment, and now every transaction you ever have, if this happens, is tracked. And when you don't comply with the system, they just delete your digital money or wipe you out of the system. You know, this is the stuff of 1984 on steroids. And this is the opportunity that bad actors are looking for in this pandemic.
Yeah, and when you say that, sorry, Nick, to interrupt you, when you say that, that's why I will always consider that the bad actors are or were in some way responsible for the pandemic to begin with. You know, because they seem to be gaining more from it than anybody else. I wanted to ask you, you did answer my question. My point was, I was originally a mainstream journalist, an academic, a university graduate, and I would never have considered that it would never have occurred to me that anybody would want to transform people physically into something. You know, I'm talking about transhumanism here and these ideas. And yet I have to consider that to be a possibility when I look at these plans, you know. David Icke was talking recently, Alex was talking recently on his program about Gates Foundation's plan to introduce the digital tattoo with all your information on it, which is delivered through a vaccine. And all of that, and I begin to wonder, this is maybe beyond the scope of most people's imaginations. All of the things are true about the money and, you know, and the greed and the corruption and all of that, but behind it there seems to be something else that's almost unspeakable or unsayable. Something so evil that most people would never entertain it. That's all I was saying. I wasn't trying to drag you into some big conspiracy discussion, but I actually am beginning to believe that there's a lot of truth to that. That's just me personally.
No, I'll go right with you on this one for this reason. And you know, in the past, as I look back on the 25 years that I've been doing this work, and in the very beginnings, you know, I knew Alex when he was in his late teens, just starting to do the, you know, the free TV, cable TV stuff that he was shooting in those days. And, you know, we saw this coming. I wrote about it 25 years ago. Yeah. Go read my work. You'll say, hey, the guy actually saw this wave coming.
You did, and my
here's
friend.
The deal.
You did. I'm doubling down on that. I'm doubling down on that. You did say it. I've been speaking to you for years. You did say it. A chapter and verse. You said it, my friend.
And here's what I know is yes, it's an evil thing in the world. And here's what it breaks down to. You know, in some of my segments I've done for InfoWars, which people can see at band.video, and just do a search under Begich, and you'll find all the videos I've done. Because I do a Friday afternoon. I do the last hour Fridays, most Fridays for InfoWars. So I get to develop, you know, the themes along this line. And one of the important issues of that is, how does the ego function? And I'm not talking about the guy who says, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. That's just a symptom of a bad ego. But I'm talking about the guy that believes that all they are is this shell they walk around in, this body they walk around in. When they drop dead, that's it. Well, those guys live in a constant state of fear because the body wants to live, you know, and they forget that they're not the body, because every cell in your body was not there when you were born. If you're about 50 or 60, you're running around with a recycled body. You know, it's been recycled a bunch of times by that age, and you're not the body. You're the energy within the body. And this is where it disconnects from a lot of the globalists don't get this. So they try to think, oh, how do I extend the body? Well, I build a machine and I hook into it and I dump my consciousness there. Boy, are they screwed up. Now, others know within quantum physics that consciousness and quantum physics, these are the same. You know, they kind of blend in, and the hardline mathematicians kind of get a little nervous, but the real physicist knows this. And quantum physics takes us to a place where we know, hey, we're way more than we think we are, and we can even start to experimentally see that. Well, here's the reality of that. Once we remember what we are, our power comes back within us, and then we begin to function as created beings a whole lot differently. This is what globalists fear the most, is an activated population. Because an activated population, fully engaged, in fact, you don't need that many, 1% would be enough, In fact, if you think of most major events that ever happened in the world, they started with less than 1%. They started with one or two people seeing it a little bit differently and acting on what they knew, what they could do in a positive way, generally, hopefully, at least in this century, we've grown up enough to do that. And here's what I know about that. Those that are aware of what consciousness is, and those that speak that say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, well, then you believe that you're created in the image and likeness of God, if you really believe that. And if you really believe that, then we need to treat each other a whole lot differently, and we need to look at the world a whole lot differently. But more importantly, we need to recognize individually every single soul has tremendous creative potential that is underutilized. And this is what globalists fear, is people that know what you are, know who you are, and stand in that place courageously and fearlessly facing the future. And that's what is being snuffed out in this very moment across the globe by generating a tremendous fear over something that everyone feels helpless about, a pandemic.
You will have expected this. By the way, Nick Begich is our guest, earthpulse.com. Nick is going to stay with me till the top of the hour. Well, just before it. We got to get out before 7, of course. It's coming up for 9:30 in the AM where Nick is in Alaska. So let me put this to you then. Can an argument be made that when a technology like 5th generation wireless technology is introduced into the public consciousness and it's sold as a better way for every one of us to do our business, to download stuff, that in fact it could be argued, especially when we've got hundreds of scientists on the record talking about the harmful effects of it, that maybe what you described as beautiful, and I subscribe to it, by the way. I didn't for a long time, but I do subscribe to it. So what you described there, is 5th generation technology, could it be argued or could it be suggested that this type of thing is developed with the express intention of interfering with us on a brain level, on a cellular level, so that we don't get too close to understanding what we're capable of? Or am I just being a conspiracy theorist?
Well, yeah, I don't know as a deliberate effect, but here's what I do know about RF generally. And we're talking about radio frequency energy, microwave energy of various wavelengths. And so what we know about that is there are window frequencies within our physiology that you can actually trigger events. You create a resonance, a harmony between, say, a cell or an element or a body organ. And when you do, you create a cascade of chemical reaction triggered by electromagnetic energy. Now, if you know a lot about this, you can digitally manipulate. You can manipulate the waveform, the pulse rate, a lot of factors that deliberately couple with the body or the brain in a specific way to create specific effects. So what you're alluding to is, could 5G be used for that? Sure, it could. So can every single electromagnetic system. And the best initiative in this was actually put together in Europe. And people can look at it and look it up and look up the Bio Initiative. It's one of the best papers, and it's been revised periodically. And I know they have on their website a Bio Initiative, very important. Hook your politicians up to that site. They've got a lot of credibility, a good body of academics from Europe talking about these problems. And so already you have systems that are weak and weakened immune systems. So anytime you add additional factors, RF, for instance, that stress the system, you weaken it even further. So can it add to the general demise of a population, the soup that we live in, the electromagnetic soup? Yes, it does. And there's not much regulation of it. An industry which controls trillions and trillions of dollars in development really don't want to give it up in favor of the average person. And here again, I say big possibilities occur at these moments of big problems. These are things that we ought to be calling for, that we have our digital privacy returned, that we have appropriate safeguards against electromagnetic fields, that we begin to look at some of these things that globalists have exploited at all of our expense, because now we have time to think again. Now we're locked up in our homes relating to each other again, maybe for the first time in decades. But we can examine how we build our futures coming out of this much differently in terms of our technology to make sure they actually serve us and don't create the problems that so many are feeling. And I know in Europe, there's people acting out pretty violently against 5G right now. And I think that's just a general reaction for being ignored for so long. You know, the European Parliament wrote papers on this stuff 2 decades ago using our research. Well, where's the work? You know, what a worthless body. At least you guys in the UK knew when it was time to leave because you saw it for what it was, a banking scheme to screw the average person to make sure money flew into bankers' hands by eventually giving up your currency. I'm so glad you guys woke up enough to realize what was going on.
Well, some of us did. I want to just acknowledge that we've had a couple of tweets from people who reckon I should have challenged you when you were talking about digital currency in the cashless society. You mentioned the possibility that governments could take money from people's accounts in a cashless society. I didn't challenge Dr. Nick Begich because he's absolutely correct. And we saw the first ever bail-ins only a few years ago when the Cypriot government allowed the European Central Bank take money from Cypriot men and women, ordinary men and women like me.
Right.
They had money taken out of their bank accounts. It was called a bail-in. And in a cashless society, they can do it anytime they bloody want. I'll challenge Nick Begich if he says anything that's wrong or that I don't agree with. But when he's right, I'm not going to challenge him. Go ahead, Nick.
It was actually enacted in our legislation, too, that most people don't know that here in the United States, when you put your money in the bank, you're considered an unsecured creditor of the bank, which puts you in the least, besides the shareholders, when the thing fails, you're in the most exposed position of all. In fact, even a bigger position of failure, because an unsecured creditor is discharged in a reorganization of a company and the shareholders keep their shares. You see, so here you are thinking you're a depositor, that you're protected. And yeah, your government may say, oh yeah, we're guarantee your money. But the reality is, take a look at how much they have available to bail people out, and you'll realize, hey man, the only way they can achieve that is to turn the presses on and make that money worthless. So the real promise of banks is not what it used to be. It's basically you're all shareholders, but you're the least subordinated shareholders when you put your money in the bank. And they don't want you to know this because people are pulling their money out of the bank. Because in Europe, when they give you negative interest rates, why the heck would you keep money in the bank? Yeah. But if they make digital currency for your own safety and security, now they can take money every month from your account and you don't get to do anything because there's no other way to trade. This is fundamentally wrong, and this violates the very essence of our freedom and liberty as individuals to take our commerce and control every aspect of our breath. Come on, that's not liberty, that's jail. It's just got no walls in it right now, unless you consider the fact that they're shoving you into your house.
I have a theory.
That's the wrong decision right now.
I have a theory. It's about you, actually. Reading Angels Don't Play That Harp, speaking to you for years, back in the Spain days, I look now at how the public has acquiesced or bent over and spread their butt cheeks. I don't want to be crass about it, but a lot of people have done. They've bent over, they've acquiesced, and I think you were the first person I ever spoke to about the soup, the electromagnetic soup, the radio frequency, and the impact that it can have. I always liked speaking to you because you never said this is definitely happening or this isn't or this is. You were always very academic in your approach. You still are. You always said, look, it's possible. And I wonder, the exposure to the soup, as you call it, has that made people more compliant without them even realising it? I think it might have done.
Absolutely did. Because here's what happens, okay? Here's what happens. Is if your mind, if you look at an EEG, you look at your brain as it's active, and you're experiencing negative emotions, you see incoherent brain patterns. They're just kind of all over the map. But if you're in your zone, you know what, and everyone has that. We all know that place where we're just focused. Then you get these very coherent brain patterns that are associated with higher ordered thinking, psychic phenomena, or what they call now anomalous human capabilities. All these things, meditation, prayer, all these things that are considered positive, love, empathy, when you're experiencing these kinds of things, there's brain coherence. Both hemispheres start to work together a little more efficiently. Things change in the brain. They pulse at a reasonable rate together, at a pulse rate that's definable, really clear patterns. This is what we were intended to do, both hemispheres, both sides, creative and analytical, working together. So to disrupt that is pretty easy. If you just keep people just a little agitated, just a little fearful, just a little worried, you can't get there. In other words, you will always be in the flight response, flight or fight, which is okay to initiate, okay, you got that reptilian brain kicks in to say, there's something to worry about. But immediately upon that experience, what the modern human can do is, instead of letting that just take you like a wave down the beach, as soon as you see fear, if you say, wow, I'm feeling fearful, and look at it, you actually control it in that instance, and then you can repack it a little differently. So you're not letting it carry you, you're recognizing it, now you're making decisions. So you engage the other side of the brain. It just takes that moment of paying attention. It's really that simple to cut the fear response or any other negative response off, whether it's anger or hate. As soon as you see your own anger, you can let it take you and you can go hit somebody, or you can say, oh, I'm angry, pull it back, and then reorganize the energy. That's the power of intellect and emotion, because then when you take that energy and reorganize it, the brain begins to pulse, and then you push emotional energy behind it, and that's how you create, and you create in a much different fashion.
It's an interesting one. Dr. Nick Begich is our guest, by the way, earthpulse.com. Nick is going to be with me for another 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm really grateful for his time today. I really am. Thanks for coming back, Nick. There's an enormous amount of tweets here. To those tweets, I'm sorry, I am asking, Nick is dealing with many of the issues that you are raising on Twitter. And I appreciate that. He's dealing with them anyway, and I'm asking him as many questions as I can in the time that we have. Isn't it very interesting what you just said to me? And I'll tell you why. We've had a phenomenon in the last 2 years. I know you've noticed this. The state is telling us, every one of us, that we've all got mental health problems. There is an ongoing agenda where public health officials keep telling us that we have to man up and admit that we've got mental health issues. We've all got mental health problems. We need to talk more about mental health. And of course, that leads to taking mental health drugs and all the rest of it. So this is a crazy thing. But because of the lockdown, Nick, I found this very funny, very ironic. Because of the lockdown, the big news broadcasters here are bringing psychotherapists and psychiatrists on the air. And this is hilarious.
Right.
Wait for it. This is hilarious. And they are telling people the lockdown is really affecting your mental health. And you know, one of the things, this is very funny, and I don't think they've got a remote sense of irony. I heard a psychiatrist tell on BBC Breakfast this morning, he told the audience, listen, if you are feeling a bit bad, the first thing you should do, wait for it, Nick, is turn off the news. On the BBC. I mean, straight from the horse's mouth. He said, you don't need to be listening to this negativity. And I thought, fantastic. Does he even realise what he's just said? We're bombarded with that negativity. Do you know Sky News has changed? Murdoch's Sky News. They've even renamed their programmes. They've got these lovely names for the hourly news bulletin, like Virus Emergency Global Pandemic. That's just scared the shit out of people, isn't it, Nick? And it's working.
This is exactly what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The media is now irresponsible. Hey, the good news I heard about the mainstream media, it won't affect BBC because you got to pay for them whether you like them or not. But the rest of the media lost $4 billion out of $5 billion in advertising in the U.S., which means maybe they go away because they can't run anymore. Because really, news is about informing the public so that we can have vigorous public debate about real information, not about inflaming the public so you can sell ads. And the media needs to be responsible. And because they are so irresponsible, that's part of the problem we're facing right now. Who do we trust? We can't trust the media, the mainstream. We cannot trust our politicians to tell us the truth. We deserve the truth. And that's the only way we're going to see any of this change. People need to behave differently, and we deserve the truth because we're mature adults, and then we can deal with what we need to do next. But how about a little truth for a change?
How about a little truth? I know you're a Christian man, and I've great respect for it. I was obviously raised Catholic, and these days, I suppose, I think I'm an agnostic, almost lapsed, but not lapsed, but almost coming out of agnostic. I'm beginning to reevaluate a lot of my opinions. So in the final few minutes, we've got 4 minutes left. You talk about energy, and you explain brilliantly the power of thought, the power of, people getting together even, and their thoughts, their love, their desire to do good, to be good, to do the right thing, that creating an energy of its own and setting off a chain reaction. Do you think, and this is a stupid loaded question because I know your answer, we've been conditioned over the years, the mass media definitely takes the lion's share of the blame, but we've been conditioned to turn away from the spiritual. And we have, there's no doubt about that. We've actually been conditioned to even think that the spiritual or the God figure, the Godhead, the Creator, we've been conditioned to laugh at that, to ridicule it, and to look down upon those who do have spirituality. If we could break that, if we could be a bit more open-minded and a little bit less obnoxious and a little bit less certain, is that something that could make a big change, do you think? If we just were a little bit more humble?
I truly believe it could. Here's how I see that is, when we look in the eyes of another human soul, remember that that's a reflection of you see there as well. And some people can't get there, but if you profess any of the major religions in the world, this is one of their foundations, you see. This is the foundation of it. And I think that's a respect, an acknowledgement of other people that really changes the way we behave. If we saw each other as created, living souls, created in the image and likeness of God, what would be the greatest blasphemy of all would be to attack another living soul, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what we do regularly in all different ways on this planet. And it creates nothing but the chaos that we've seen for the thousands of years that we witnessed it. And so doing more of the same is not the answer. Doing something different is. And we need a different approach to the way that we interact with each other, and to remember what we are as created beings and begin acting that way. And it starts one person at a time. I believe that. I think acting on faith, what is faith anyway? It's believing something and acting on it. It's as simple as that. There's no great mystery in it. And I too was raised a Catholic once upon a time. And I remember having a conversation with a priest that couldn't explain to me what faith was. And I can tell you what it is: acting on what you know to be right and true, taking a step in the right direction and taking a responsible one that you will be responsible for, trying to do a little bit of good around you in the planet, and to seek honestly what that is that you can contribute. That's it. The rest will sort itself out. God will figure it out. And I think that the things that we do to penalize each other for not believing like we do is wrong. God is big enough to encompass an awful lot and allow us to follow our own pathway to enlightenment, whatever that is. Follow your own pathway. Find your own energy. Find the power that is you, that was intended to be you, and do that in the world. That's what I would like to say to everyone out there, because we can do something different. And then the thing changes. And it only takes one, the right one, who knows which screw to turn. And we all know in our personal lives which screw to turn.
Loved having you back today, Nick. It's been too long. Thanks for coming on. I just want to mention again, look, it's obvious that my audience they know everything there is to know about InfoWars, so they know who you are. You can see Nick regularly on Infowars.com, but his website is earthpulse.com. Do visit earthpulse.com and check him out. Thanks for coming back today, and thanks for your forgiveness this week.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime, and I'm always glad to do it with you guys. My best to everyone in Europe.
You too, Nick. Look after yourself. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thanks.
The brilliant Dr. Nick Begich, live from Anchorage in Alaska on Thursday's Richie Allen Radio Show. I love Nick because I wouldn't know anything about HAARP, and most people wouldn't know anything about HAARP if it wasn't for Nick Begich. And this is the truth of it, you know. And we've been on this, if I say journey, I'm going to start sounding like Owen Jones, God forbid. But we've had this pathway for years now, you and me, together. It's true, it's not soft talk. You and me have been on a path for years. At some stage we joined the same path. didn't we? We knew that stuff was fucked up. And we stopped believing what we were being told. We started to see through the lies and the deception and the tyranny. We saw through it, and then we found source material, didn't we? We found the resources were made available to us. And we found men and women, intelligent men and women, and they were a kind of a guide along the path, saying, yeah, you're not going mad, actually. You aren't losing your mind. This stuff is really happening. And Nick Begich is in there for me because he, as far as I'm concerned, blew the whistle on HAARP, which, if you don't know what HAARP is, it's the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. And they tell you it's in Alaska, but there are lots of them. It's a big row of radio antennae blasting frequencies into the ionosphere, screwing with the jet stream. It's mad shit, right? It really is. And potentially, well, it's got potential to do lots of different things, change the weather, cause seismic events and all of that. And Nick Begich was kind of a whistleblower on it. And it was a big thing, you know. Learning about HAARP was a big thing when you were on the path. You know what I mean? That was a big milestone. HAARP, Jesus, are they really doing that stuff? Yes, they are. And it might have been linked to various events, weather phenomenon and stuff like that. And it's important. So I'll always have time for Nick for doing that. It's a big deal, that, you know. So you want to find out more about that, go to earthpulse.com. And the book that Nick wrote is Angels Don't Play That HAARP. And this HAARP thing is an ongoing concern, you know. It didn't go away. And there are satellite photographs of other such installations around the world doing God knows what in the ionosphere. You know? And so he's good. He's good. I like him. But yeah, look, for the religion thing, one of the most common questions I don't get asked very many questions. And the reason I don't is because I'm very private. And when I'm not on air, it's not easy to find me online because I don't hang out online very much. I get asked, why, Richie? Why do you not believe in God, Richie? Why do you not believe in a benevolent creator? And the simple answer is, when I was young, I read some books that were written for children about Jesus Christ and the teachings of Jesus Christ and the message. And it's great. It's beautiful. It's a blueprint for life. But we were going to school and we were being taught that by bastard teachers and by priests, some of whom turned out to be paedophiles. Yeah, there's always a bad apple in the barrel. Yeah, but then I found out that the institution itself was covering it up and moving the priests around. And then I found that the people in society most likely to invoke the name of God were bastard politicians. We pray in Jesus' name. May God bless America. Well, Donald, I wouldn't imagine if God existed, he wants to bless America right now, to be honest. You know? Your country drops more bombs in a day than most people have hot dinners in their lives. Don't think God's down with your bombing the shit out of countries in the Middle East there, Donald. So that's, in a nutshell, why I just found the whole thing preposterous. And for years, I would have been of the belief that organised religion was basically a control mechanism of the elites. Wonderful in its simplicity. Be very good. Be very nice. Do what you're told. Do what we tell you, and you'll go to heaven. And if you don't, as the great Dave Allen, rest in peace, one of the best comedians of all time, said, you'll be cast into eternal flame. And I looked at all that and went, I just don't buy any of it. Not buying any of it. But as for what I think now at 45, I don't know, is what I think. I believe in the power of thought. I believe that outside of our physical bodies, our physical bodies are nothing but a vehicle. I don't believe it ends at the end. I believe there's something else. So I've got to be agnostic, I suppose. That's why I say I don't mean to be disrespectful. I don't think somebody is less intelligent than I am if they go to Mass on Sunday and become a cannibal for 30 seconds when they take the body of Christ. I think that's fucking ridiculous, personally, but I don't think the person is less intelligent than I am. I just don't share their faith that I'm actually getting a little slice of the baby Jesus that was dipped in some of his blood. I find it preposterous, but I don't know. What do I know? You could fill volumes of books that, if you stacked them, they'd reach to the moon with the things I don't know, because I don't know very much, which is very apparent if you've listened to this program for a long time. I'm as in the dark as most people. But yeah. No, I love Nick. Love the fact that he wrote about HARP and introduced it, and big milestone that, learning about that and what it was doing. Earthpulse.com, lots and lots of stuff about HARP online if you want to read about it, if it's the first time you've ever heard of it, and it might be. It's a very, very interesting thing, you know. Very interesting thing. So there you go. Now, let me give you a heads up about next week. Samantha Baldwin made headline news in this country a few years ago. I don't have any notes here now. I hope Sam is not listening. She's a wonderful lady. Met Sam a few times and is a beautiful soul. Great lady. Last time I met Sam, I was at the Bowlers Exhibition Centre in Manchester doing a gig with David Icke. Well, I was basically emceeing David's appearance, and I'd met Sam a couple of times. She came up. She met Caroline, an amazing woman. And Sam made national and international headlines when she fled her home with her sons because she feared that her sons were going to be taken away from her because her sons had told her that they had been sexually abused by her father. It was a major, major story. Samantha Baldwin. And we often talked about Sam coming on, and I never put any pressure on her. Never. I wouldn't put any pressure on anybody. In fact, I would have been saying to Sam, look, it's not a good idea. I mean, she was like, it's not a good idea, Richie, because of where things... I said, of course, not a good idea. No good can come of it. Injunctions and what have you. But Sam's about ready now to talk. There are certain things that Sam can talk about. So she's going to be on this radio programme this coming Monday at 5 o'clock, just after 5. And I don't want you to miss it. Okay? Judy Mikovits will be on the programme next week. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny will be on the programme next week. Lots of people booked in next week. It's easier to book people in now because it's going to be virus, pandemic, global emergency. Fucking Sky News. For the next 3 years or thereabouts. So Judy Mikovits, Sherry Tenpenny amongst the guests. Both of them have been on the Richie Allen Show in the past, not recently. Samantha Baldwin, of course, on Monday. And we'll have a lot of stuff going on next week on your Richie Allen radio show. There is none like it, is there? Is there, I said. Thanks so much to Dr. Nick Begich. Thanks to you for listening this week. I'll be with you on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. That is UK time for Sunday View, where you and I will have a browse of the UK's newspapers. We'll play a couple of tunes and hopefully we'll have a few laughs, eh? Musical genius Stevie Wonder closing out today's programme. Have a fantastic weekend. It's bye from me. Bye now.